According to statistics, 15 to 38% of adults have experienced molestation from childhood to teenage years. To 38, men and women. Not like Joyce Meyer, she was molested when she was young by her dad. T.Y. Bello, she was also molested. I was molested when I was young. I was just 3 years old. Yeah. Welcome to another episode of Modus Operandi. It is yours truly, Dr. B. Mark, aka Dr. Macaulay Barnabas. It is nice to be here for the 6th episode of this interesting podcast. Yeah, I'm quite excited for this episode, just like every other episode, and it's going to be an interesting ride. So I'll be talking about the Marys and the Rahabs. Yes, the Marys and the Rahabs. While this name symbolizes two women, it's basically about all of us, male and female, right? So something happened in the beginning of the year. I was scrolling through my Twitter feed, just trying to learn, as usual, to interact with the social. I saw a tweet, and the tweet was by a lady. She was expressing how proud she was about her virginity. To my surprise, I saw other women revolting, like they were offended by that tweet. I was really quite amazed. Some went ahead by requoting that tweet, quoting the tweet, saying all sorts of things against her about virginity. And I was surprised, like, why would you be angry that someone else is proud of their virginity? Why are you triggered? It was quite an interesting situation for me. Then I thought to myself, maybe they felt insecure by the fact that that lady was talking about her virginity. Maybe they weren't virgins, of course, and her purity reminded them of their own past that they seem not to be proud of. It was quite an interesting thing for me. I thought to myself, like, virginity should be something that should be celebrated. It is a good thing. It is a virtue. It is what ought to be. It is the ideal. Whether we are talking about virginity from the perspective of sex or from the perspective of any virtue, right? That is expected of a person, a Christian in particular, right? We should be able to celebrate virginity. We should be able to celebrate what is good. It is a way of raising example. It's the way of encouraging more people to strive to become virgins. Anyways, I thought to myself that this is quite an interesting conversation to have, and I'm going to dwell on the concept of God's love. And love has two arms. There is the empathy arm of love. There is the truth arm of love. And over time, I realized people have a very huge difficulty in being adept at this balance. Some people can be overly empathetic. Some people can be overly truthful. But true expression of love requires one to be armed with both equally. What am I talking about? I'm still talking about the Marys and the Rahabs. So in that instance, you have a Mary talking about her virginity, and you have, in quote, Rahabs, I assume, being triggered by the fact that she's talking about her virginity. So we all know Mary in scriptures. We know Rahab. So Mary is the mother of Jesus, or was the mother of Jesus. She gave birth to Jesus, and she was a virgin. For Rahab, on the other hand, she was a prostitute. She was the person who God used as a cover for the spies Joshua sent to scout the land of Jericho. And that is the story of these two great individuals. Well, I wouldn't entirely blame those women that felt triggered. I understand they were projecting. I know they were projecting. That was why they were all vile and aggressive, triggered. Why would you say such a thing? Well, there's nothing in virginity. Virginity is overrated. I was just observing the whole situation. I wouldn't really blame them entirely because I have seen situations where people with pure sexual experience, men and women, deliberately spite those without one as a way to feel superior because of their purity journey, because of the privilege of being a virgin. So sometimes these sort of like affect the security of those who did not have that past, right? And now, when I'm talking about Mary's and Rahab in the context of this conversation, Rahab is not necessarily a prostitute. Rahab in this conversation is someone who did not have a pure sexual history, while Mary is someone who had a pure sexual history. Speaking generically, yes, that's what I mean by Rahabs and Mary. And if you are a Rahab literally, like a prostitute, the conversation also involves you. And there's no discrimination here. So when I mean Rahab, I mean someone who is not a virgin. When I mean Mary, I mean someone who is a virgin. So I understand why the Rahabs, in quotes, felt the way they felt, because sometimes you get to be called all sorts of names. You've been judged all your life. In fact, beyond that, you have even judged yourself more for certain actions that you took in the past or even currently, and you don't feel proud about it, but it is what it is, right? Then someone from nowhere is coming to talk about their own virginity, being proud of it. I get it. But one thing about God is that He loves both, be it a Mary or a Rahab. None is higher than the other to Him. By essence, they are the same to God in essence. Now, I'll be very clear with my semantics here. For the Marys, it is the grace of God that is expressed in the preservation of her purity. For the Rahab, it is the grace of God that is expressed in the restoration of her purity. Amazing story. That is the beauty of God. He's dynamic. He is love. He is the one who has the arm of empathy and the arm of truth. Love. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, love has both arms. For the Rahabs, a substantial part of the population are Rahabs. According to statistics, 15 to 38% of adults have experienced molestation from childhood to teenage years. To 38, men and women, though it's usually higher in women, but it happens in both. The gap is not so much. So you can imagine how this experience oftentimes is translated into their sexual journey. Someone like Joyce Meyer, she was molested when she was young by her dad. T.Y. Bello, she was also molested. I was molested when I was young. I was just 3 years old. Yeah. Everybody have their stories, right? Whether they are Marys or Rahabs. So I'm talking about the Rahabs now. So you get molested. Sometimes nothing happens sexually until you get married, fine. But for some others, a majority of others, that translates into sexual experiences, because an aspect of your brain has been activated to that experience, to the understanding and thirst for that experience. Then you involve yourself in all forms of activities until maybe God finds you. Then you begin your purity journey. There's a name they call it. I don't know. I can't find the name right now. So that's the story. For some, the purity journey never begins. They stumble into that lifestyle. They get married in the process and all that. So that is for the Rahabs. Sometimes I've realized that you really cannot entirely blame a person for not being pure before marriage, sexually pure before marriage. That is, some things were out of their control. Someone who was raped, for instance, now, two things happens. Either they become extremely interested in sex, whereby they become a nympho, or they become extremely disinterested in sex, right? So what if it becomes the other end of the equation where there is this thirst for sex? You don't value yourself. And this whole experience of molestation, rape or no rape, every form of sexual abuse, what it does to a person is it affects your self-worth. You do not consider your body worth keeping anymore. After all, they've taken what they want to take. After all, I've done this, so why bother? Let's just go on with this. Then you become a Rahab. Not literally. You get the point. I've already explained what it means. I will not entirely blame the Rahab, but when saved, you are a new man in Christ. Old things have indeed passed away. Now, you are a new creature in Christ Jesus, bearing his life in you. Your self-worth is now tied to your relationship with your maker, not your sexual history. No one can blame you for coming from the family you came from. And sometimes you may not have been molested. You just didn't know better. Wrong association of friends. Maybe you didn't have a solid parenthood or something. Then you find yourself in this, right, situation. You wouldn't really blame yourself. God understands. God sees. God knows. Is the empathetic God. Is the loving God. He has all the context with him. He knows what happened beyond what you even can comprehend. That is God. He sees all the situations, all the context. Nonetheless, he loves you. And that is the beauty about Rahab. And the funny thing about Rahab's story is that she is in the hall of faith, Hebrews 11. She is the great-great-grandmother of David, in the lineage of Jesus. That is the remarkable awesomeness of God. How that despite the mess, there is the message of restoration. There is the message of salvation. There is the message of transformation. That is a beautiful expression of God's love. Talking about the Rahabs. There is now a transformation. I am not defined by my past. And I don't feel small when a Mary talks about her purity journey, whether she's arrogant about it or not. I don't care. I'm happy for you. But now I am saved. I'm a new person. I am of essence the same as you. And you are the same as me by essence. Now, here is the other extreme. For the Marys, I have seen that sometimes in expressing the empathetic aspect of God's love, which is the second arm of love, people sometimes do it at the expense of truth, which is another important arm of God. We should not stretch the expression of God's empathy at the expense of truth. What am I trying to say? When God was going to give birth to his son, Jesus, it was a Mary he used. He did not use a Rahab. Rahab had her own function and purpose, being in the lineage from which Jesus Christ would come. But when the birth itself was going to happen, standard was required. The standard of purity via Mary was required. That is the intelligence of God. I like when Paul said we should teach the whole counsel of God. Yes, This is another important dimension of God's love, standards. Elijah was talking about how he was tired, how he was the only one who had not bowed down to Baal, and all that. He was basically depressed and suicidal. God told him, I have preserved from myself, I have reserved for myself 7,000 persons who have not bowed down to Baal. The word there is kept. It means that in the journey of purity, as a Mary, being a Mary, you will, if you are honest with yourself, you will see the hand of God in your story. From the family you were born into, because someone could have done something stupid to you, which could have led to a cascade of events that eventually will bring you to where you are. Of course, I am not underplaying or undermining the effort you put in remaining a virgin currently or before you got married. I'm not doing that, but I'm trying to make you understand that it is impossible to work out my salvation in fear and trembling when God is not working in me both to will and to do. That is, my ability to do something is because there is already a doing in me in the first place by God. So any person who married a virgin, a man or a woman, there is always a very clear divine guidance, divine preservation in their story. Very, very clear. If they are honest, they had a lot of almost, or a few almost, where it was the sound of the bell that saved them from it happening. So what this does is to keep you humble, even in purity, so that you have to declare the purity from a place of humility, not timidity, because standards must be spoken of. It is important so that we have healthy families. It is important so that people are encouraged to keep their virginity. People are encouraged to be celibate just in case they were Rahabs. Standards must always be said. The importance of sexual purity must be kept, must be emphasized continuously, but it must be done from this wholesome perspective, to know that I am not superior to a Rahab just because I am a virgin. No, it is important to be a virgin, but primarily my self-worth is in Christ Jesus, not my virginity. My self-worth is in Christ Jesus, not my virginity, even though it is important to raise the standard of sexual purity. So for the Rahab, you shouldn't feel low, you shouldn't feel inferior or insecure when you are close to a Mary. If you were a Rahab, or if you are currently a Rahab, if you've been saved but you are struggling, you shouldn't feel low. Your self-worth is in the fact that you are a new creature. And you should reflect that self-worth. You should reflect that life. You should reflect that new reality. So God is the one who expresses in grace in both. For the Marys, there's the expression of preservation in purity. For the Rahab, there's an expression of restoration into purity. Amazing God. Amazing God. That is grace. That is grace. That is how it works. Both in restoration and the reflection of the restoration. Both in preservation and the restoration of and the preservation of the preservation. That is God. So Rahabs and Marys, whichever one you are loved by God. You are loved by God. You are loved by God. So if someone comes to you and address you based on what you did previously, oh, you used to have many girls, oh, you used to have many boyfriends, oh, you used to do this, oh, you used to do that. They are in the past. It is not your responsibility to start explaining to them. You are living in a new address. You've changed location. You don't owe anybody that explanation anymore. Live in your reality. Your self-worth is in Christ Jesus. You couldn't change the family you were born into. Yes, you participated in the error as well. I'm not trying to make you feel like you did not participate in the whole past. Yes, you did. You made certain decisions. You didn't know better. It is fine. It is past. And to the Mary, enjoy your purity. Don't feel bad about it. Proclaim it. Teach it. Teach the essence of it. We will express love both via the arm of empathy and via the arm of truth. Always checking truth with empathy and always checking empathy with truth. I hope you've had a wonderful time today. I hope this has really been a blessing. Now, our next episode is going to be amazing. Oh, quite amazing. We'll be talking about finding the one. Yes, I can't wait for this episode. All through the month of January in 2026, it will be this conversation, finding the one, talking about finding the right one, marriage, and all that. There are a lot of school of thought about this conversation. Again, the whole council will be taught. It will be beautiful. It is world class. There is nothing better than it. Nothing. Trust me. So until next time, do have a wonderful weekend. Merry Christmas and a happy New Year. Enjoy.